Hey, hi there. Hi, sorry, I cannot hear you actually. Can you hear me? Okay, so you're muted right now, right? Hmm. Okay, so I have to make sure that you can hear me properly because last time when I debated with Josh, then my net connection wasn't working properly. So he has really a difficult time understanding me. You can hear me properly, right? Okay, fine. So let's get started. Okay. So basically, there are two parts of the debate, right? The tagline says US drone attacks on other countries, though immoral, but are necessary, right? So, as far as this immoral part is concerned, I think you would certainly agree with that because it is sometimes stated that even 90% or more than 90% of the targets who are killed in these kind of attacks are not the intended targets. And if I just put in some data here, then from 2009 to 2015, uh, almost 473 strikes took place, right? So the total number of terrorists killed in all these strikes were 2,500 almost. And if we go by the data that 90% people who are killed are not the intended targets, then we will come up with the number which would tend to amount somewhere around 25,000, which is certainly a great number. And moreover, if we go by the data which was actually presented by Bureau of Investigation Journalism, United States, then all attacks that took place in Pakistan, Yemen, and Somalia, they actually caused death of 800 people. So certainly there is no doubt that the attacks are immoral, right? But why they are necessary? Why these attacks are important, in spite of being such deadly and causing such a greater number of deaths? Well, uh, I would like to tell you that the current threat to our security system right now, both at home and abroad, maybe at your country or maybe mine, emanate from people who have actually longed on this long established book of armed conflict, right? So they are using extreme level violence. I'm sorry, you cannot hear me. Actually, I said that they have torn this long established book of armed conflict, right? They are using immoral.
Okay, I guess it's my turn to speak now. I had some trouble hearing you at the end there, and yes, of course, I totally agree with you that this is immoral, and I find it very interesting that we are just talking about the necessity of it, and that's the title. But I think when you say that 90% of the deaths caused by these drone strikes, that's not just a moral argument. It goes toward the efficiency of the attacks, and so we can't be sure that they're accurate because it's 90%, that's one of the arguments for this. I know as well is that it increases the quality and the accuracy, and also the study that you mentioned. It does not. I assume you're talking about the Obama study, and I noticed that you mentioned that it accounts for attacks in Yemen and Somalia, but the thing is, it doesn't account for attacks elsewhere, and it doesn't. It's kind of cherry picking because it doesn't account for the attacks in Syria, Iraq, and I'm forgetting at least one more country. Um, so I think there's some flaws in your argument there, because uh, it doesn't really have to be a moral argument there, because it's my understanding that there really are no numbers to justify these attacks. In a nutshell, just for the sake of talking about the necessity, and I know I tend to talk kind of fast, so I'm going to go ahead and pass it, and I hope that you can understand me. And I think if you could, I don't want to be rude, but if you could just talk a little bit slower as well, that would be helpful.
Okay, your voice is actually a bit interrupting, so I wasn't um, um, completely understand. But certainly, I'll go along with my point that I would, in order to put that into perspective better, I would actually put in some point. You told, first of all, you told me that there are certainly cannot be a precise quantification of the of the total number of people who have died, right? Exactly, that is true because the total number for the people who have been killed, actually, the number which I was stating earlier was actually told by President Obama himself in a conference that I was stating. So certainly, there's no corroboration for that matter. But you know, if if in order to put that into perspective better, if I state some of the data of number of deaths that has been involved due to these terrorist attacks from 2006 to all the way 2014, then I will then it is not very difficult to envisage that the number of deaths have been constantly increasing from 2006 to 2014. Uh, if I just we have to quantify, then in 2006 the total number of deaths we had 20,500. In 2005 it was 22,000, and it kept increasing till 2013, which was 18,066 in 2013, and went up to 32,000 in 2014. So why the number is constantly increasing? Because our stolidity and non-challenge attitude towards these attacks, which has been taking place by these terrorist organizations, has actually made the terrorists see us a very soft target for it, right? And their confidence is constantly increasing. Uh, so I think here I'll leave it to you. Am I supposed to push some button in order to? Okay, I cannot figure out what to do, so let me complete with this one more sentence. So we have a couple of examples here. We can take example of 9/11 attacks. We have example of Oklahoma City. In 9/11 attacks, actually total number of people who were killed were 3,000, right? 6,000 people were injured, and $10 billion property loss took place. And all in all, there were $3 trillion loss. So, and number of terrorists involved were 90. So you can tell them out that cost up to around 475 4 lives for each terrorist.
Okay, it's my turn to speak now. Um, are there less terrorists now? It's my understanding that there's more terrorists. We've been conducting these attacks since 2001, and there's no way to measure the success. The ways that we're tracking these terrorists, for example, is we're just tracking the SIM card on their cell phone, and we then to the point where, and then whoever's with them, we track them too, and that's how we're tracking these people. And the other thing um, that isn't being accounted for is that who are we calling a terrorist? That could be any adult male. Any adult male could be classified as a terrorist. And the study so the bias is to prove that they're not a terrorist instead of that they're a terrorist to begin with. So there really aren't a lot of good ways to measure to measure this. And the study that I was talking about is the study the Obama administration came out with that only they claimed it was only about a tenth of what all the other studies were saying, that sort of to justify what they were doing, because people, they may have believed that Obama was against this sort of thing, and he wasn't. And but they didn't account for the attacks in Iraq, Syria, and Afghanistan. So it was a flawed study that cherry picks. And I think ultimately, um, what we really need to get at here is that the U.S. just shouldn't be involved whatsoever, and that would be better for all the parties. And since I know you also mentioned uh, 9/11, It's interesting that that the reason that Muhammad Atta attacked was because he was oppressed by this, mostly because he was oppressed by the Saudi Arabia government that the U.S. provides aid to, and he was also upset about the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, and these are his own words, and he was upset about that as well. So that's why he conducted those attacks. And Osama bin Laden's goal, supposed goal for these attacks, and this is the official story, is that it would put the U.S. into more conflict in the region, and that would help these terrorists, which it has. If you look at the course of intervention since 9/11 and the situation in Syria, Iraq, etc. Now it's only getting worse. So this is just another example of why we need to change our foreign policy. I'll go ahead and pass it back to you.
Okay, I think um, the point that you mentioned, that the data is actually cherry picked, that Mr. Obama mentioned earlier. Well, I do believe that, and I agree with you at this point, because the data that I have presented, that 90% or more people are actually killed in these attacks, are actually not the intended targets, are actually data which was present in, I actually found on website. What Mr. Obama had told, I mean, what Mr. Obama had told in a press conference was that the civilian casualty in such type of operations are actually far, far less than the traditional surgical strikes that take place through some other means. So the data that I presented was actually not understated. I actually avoided his statement, which was actually really understated. So uh, moreover, I think since you questioned Mr. Obama's perspective to approach such kind of attacks, then I would say that this is not some kind of willy-nilly that let's go and bomb a village. So these strikes are not really random. There is basically a set of administrative guidelines whereby these weapons are being used, right? So what Mr. Obama's government did, they put forth a non-classified version of what these directives look like. I mean, it says like you will not use the weapon unless you have near certainty that there will be not any civilian casualties, and that you have near certainty that the targets you are hitting are actually terrorist organizations, which are actually trying to do imminent harm. So these are all agencies that are involved, and there is a certain level through which all these kind of decisions has to go through, and there are certain authorities which have to approve such kind of operation in order to take place. So there's very intricate system involved throughout this operation, and it's not some kind of random operation that takes place. So I think more or less there is some kind of information about this among the common people as well. So I mean, whenever there is a war, uh, there is always loss on both of the sides, right? And moreover, there's a saying on your side. I don't know if it's very prevalent in this, it's very appropriate in this case or not. But whenever bulls fight, crops suffer, right? So this is what happening in this case as well. So uh, coming back to you.
I don't really think it touches that hits my statement that diplomacy would be better, but I think you're actually kind of supporting it a little bit with that argument. But I think the important thing that you haven't mentioned that I need to ask you is you mentioned authorities. What authority are you talking about, and can you explain how they determine these targets? Because my understanding isn't that it's random, like you said, that it's just it's bias basically because you're just tracking someone's cell phone and who they're with and saying that they're terrorists. So how can you do I've even heard. This is something else I'd like to add, that sometimes it's that farmers are actually bombed just because of they're loading fertilizer in their machines and this sort of thing. So can you explain this better than that? What authority?
Well, certainly that cannot be stated. Actually, the operations that take place under the military consideration are all these operations which cannot be revealed. Modus operandi of these operations certainly cannot be told to other authorities, lest they can use it for their profit, right? The way your military operation, the way your military performs operation, certainly is not going to reveal its modus operandi to other countries, right? It's just as simple as that. And certainly, whenever there's some kind of operation like this going to take place, then as I told you, the intricacies and the baroque descriptions or the baroque levels that are being involved in such kind of cases are very well thought, and it has to go through all these levels. And certainly, since operation is a very big one and so much money is being put in such kind of operations, then it has to be very intricate, right? And moreover, you talked about tracking phones and all this. My dear friend, they are terrorists. I mean, these. I mean, there are people who would be more than happy to blow up the place where you are living right now, right? And there are people who are roaming around freely, um, in spite of killing so many people. So, cannot. I mean, in order to bring justice to them, don't you think this is the proper thing to do? I mean, I mean, you're talking about killing terrorists, you're talking about eradicating terrorism, right? So these are the things that are ought to be done. So back to you to transfer the call. Is it inter? Okay, let me complete. Then I think I won't be able to transfer. Okay, then I would put in some of the more points there. I think, okay, since I was talking about attacks that has been taking place um, in these cases, so let me quantify. If I were to talk about 9/11 attacks, then there are only 19 terrorists were involved. Only 19 terrorists who caused or affected somehow 9,000 people, right? And these kind of attacks are being increased with the course of time. So some substantial action has to be taken against them. And I mean, otherwise their confidence will just increase with the course of time. And this soft stand or stolidity of ours, our nonchalant attitude that we have taken so far, will just worsen the condition. That will just persist the condition in spite of letting it in the bud. So I think something harsh and uh, on something solid on.
Okay, um, that's a lot, and I know that we're both trying to communicate a little bit better. It's my understanding that what you're saying is the operation is successful because of the expense. You told me that that's what I heard a lot of verbiage about how complex this is in a hypothetical sense, but no procedure to qualify why this is just to counter counter my argument, um, uh, because especially going back to 9/11, I think it's easy to just go back to what I said before as well, that Osama bin Laden, this was his goal, was to get us into the Middle East, and of course the reason that these attackers alleged that they were upset at us was because we were over there in the first place. Um, I think after in 2017, looking back on 2001, there's no this is should be very clear. I think most Americans would agree with me, regardless of their political opinion otherwise, that there really needs to be an exit strategy in the Middle East, and that there's no record of progress. It's going nowhere. The spinning's out of control, and it's ridiculous. Um, and So I'll go ahead and pass it back to you.
Hmm. Well, I think I couldn't explain my point of authority very well, or maybe you were not able to listen properly, but maybe because of my connection. But what I was saying, that the process is actually not revealed to common people. How the military works is actually the modus operandi of actually a coveted modus operandi of the military itself, right? It remains within the military so that it cannot be used against them, right? So I was just saying that these operations are not revealed to common people, neither they are revealed to someone else. They remain inside of the military. And uh, moreover, actually, yeah. So I think actually I would like to forward this point to you. Uh, Actually, if I can do that. Oh, I'm really sorry. I'm really sorry. I think I mistakenly transferred it backwards. That's okay. So I still have 2 minutes left. So let me put in some of the more points. So if we take example of Jihadi John, right? He was a terrorist who was actually killed in such kind of strike. So it was certainly not some kind of random experiment, right? Let's go and find some of the terrorists and hope that we would be lucky enough to find some, and we'll bomb them. So what actually happened that he was actually followed for some months, right? For some 2 or 3 months, and when they were make sure when they were sure that he is actually in a place where he can be attacked and the minimum civilian casualties will be incurred, including the uh, including the property loss as well. Then he was attacked, and this is how the attack performed. And I mean, all the attacks just take place such a way. And moreover, I think uh, as a president of your country, Mr. Obama, what he can do is to set up a system as best as he can, so as to avoid so as to avoid any kind of damage, while making sure that all of you live safely, right? So this is his job, and I think he's doing it very well.
Okay. So my understanding is that I'm rebutting um, that these military attacks are better because there's fewer civilian casualties, and that there would be uh, some sort of methodology behind finding the person. Uh, I think the answer here is that I think we're actually creating more terrorists. Would be one thing, because one study actually says that for every terrorist that we get, we create 40 to 60 more in Pakistan, and I'm sure that's the reason. Because I know India has a lot of conflict with Pakistan, so I think that's probably you know a, a really good example. And it's not really it's not like it's not been saying it's not a diplomatic approach um, either. And I think because it's questionable, we would do better if we needed to enter this conflict. I don't believe we even need to enter it, but if we need to enter this conflict, to do that without this type of weaponry, to do it with the strongest military in the world. And the U.S. I actually have no fear that these people can do any that they can come here and do anything to me. And of course, if they did, I wouldn't have a problem with that. But um, I don't believe that I need to be over there stopping them, and I don't see any evidence that it's helping any. And in fact, I'm convinced it's making it worse as I've been illustrating. Um, and and especially because I am the person in the U.S. who pays for this.
Well, my friend, you question the technology that it's becoming worse with the course of time, right? I mean, more casualties might be there down the road, right? This is the point that you put forth earlier. Well, let me tell you that uh, before this um, this tenure of Mr. Obama coming while he came to office, before that time, uh, while the previous president was in the office, the drone technology was not improved considerably, right? And it actually accelerated with the course of time during the tenure of Mr. Obama. And during this period of 2008 to 2014, the maximum surgical strikes took place from your side. So obviously the technology is improving with the course of time, and this is the inherent nature of the technology. It improves with the course of time. It is said that even as far as the technical section is concerned, the overhauling of the technology takes place in every 3 years, right? So we have a new technology in every 3 years. So the precision with which these strikes are happening are actually improving with the course of time, and moreover, consequently, less civilian casualties will be there. So I think this is a great option, and because there are set of people who are just operating the drones, who are actually sitting thousands of the miles from the drone, and even if the drone was attacked, then they would remain safe, right? So I think this is a great option. Second, I think it is very important to set an example, right? Because if I just were to talk about surgical strike that happened in India earlier, that happened in Pakistan earlier, actually, which actually took place, which was actually conducted by Indian officers. You might have heard of it. I don't know if you are. But what actually they did, they infiltrated the Pakistani territory, got into the territory, killed some militants, and then came back. So why they did that? What is the symbols? Certainly they weren't doing anything. They did it to set an example that if you do that, we are certainly going to strike back. We're not going to sit alone. We are not going to sit quiet and see everything. You're not going to do that at my watch. And this set an example, and I think this was very effective because ever since after when it happened, none of the strikes happened. So these kind of operations are, I think, very important and should be performed uh, under the watch of military. So I think I'll wait for you to put in next argument.
Okay. Um, yes, of course, Obama didn't start the program. Bush did in 2001. He escalated the tension, and the number of terrorists increased. As I already said, um, and the interesting thing when we talk about um, the Pakistan is that the Pakistani government is actually opposed to this, and the U.S. actually gives a lot of money to Pakistan. We've given them, last count, I think that was about $60 billion over the course of our relationship. I think it's about a 50-year relationship. So we're kind of funding both sides. And there was actually a little girl who came here to the United States just to tell from Pakistan, just to tell Obama about how terrible this is, and how it creates blowback and more terrorists. And yeah, I don't think just giving one example accounts for the success of an entire program either. In fact, I even heard claims that this could lead to a civil war over there. So stop giving Pakistan money and stop bombing people. Sounds good to me.
Well, my friend, you talked about that at least, I mean, a single example won't be sufficient. Let me tell you that there are multiple examples, and US, United States in particular, have been doing it for long. And they have been set an example, and I think it has worked very effectively, and it has certainly served the purpose of keeping the terrorists away. No major terrorist attacks have been happening ever since 2011. So I think another you point that you made, that number of terrorists are increasing. Well, I think this uh, moral, what I think, moral inspiration. That when I mean, say there is some man who has a daughter, who has a son, and he dies in such kind of surgical strike, then obviously his son is more likely than not happen to um, become a terrorist as well, right? So I mean, this is something which is inevitable, that cannot be avoided. But certainly, we can set an example. We can make people know about that. If you're going to follow that pace, then certainly you have to pay, and we are certainly not going to sit back and watch everything till um, as long as you are there, or as long as you are planning to do something substantial, or if you're trying to cause some kind of imminent harm. So as and moreover, as I've already told you, that technology is being improved. So as I think we are a little bit deviating from the subject. Let's stay to the point that these US drone attacks are actually necessary. Why it is necessary? Because the technology is being improved. The technology, the accuracy and the precision is being improved the course of time, and this is why less less civilian casualties and less um, uh, what we call less damage are likely to be done in further technologies that are going to be introduced. So I think it's a great option. Certainly, we should go for that. Uh, that is why it is called unarmed vehicle. And well, I would like to transfer it to you at this point, and let's see what point you made. There are still 35 seconds, and I don't know how to transfer. I would like you to tell me afterwards which button I'm supposed to press in order to transfer the call. Maybe that will help. And moreover, told me once that the data is actually cherry picked. Actually, the government is actually planning to make a certain forum where everything will be very clear, where they will put.
Okay, since you seem to be making a moral argument for this, actually, I feel like you're making a moral argument because you're saying that the U.S. needs to set this example, and I think we're setting we do set the example, and we're setting a poor example here because, like I said, these attacks could come back on us, and they're not really diplomatic attacks that follow the rules. And the Pakistani government is opposed to it. They don't want us to do it. And in fact, we're actually now giving them the capacity to do it themselves. So more of a reason for the U.S. not to be involved. Um, and I think one point that I haven't gotten to is targeted killing, because that's the other thing, is that we're not doing this through diplomacy, where through our constitution and the rules that we have, where traditionally we would have to declare a war. Those rules are in place for a reason, and I don't think that it's right to go around that. And the U.S. Our intelligence agency in the U.S. itself shouldn't be involved in foreign intervention, not only in the idea of a conflict, but setting up governments, like the government in Pakistan, that's a puppet government, and trying to change regimes and all this sort of thing, where there's documented cases of the U.S. doing that, the CIA, in both Latin America and the Middle East, and I'm sure there's many other citable cases elsewhere. So what I'm hearing here is a moral argument that the U.S. needs to set an example, but we're actually setting a very poor example. I'm going to go ahead and say it's immoral because it's a moral argument, and it could really be one that comes back to honest. In fact, I think we've even used a drone on a citizen that happened this past summer, if you remember that. the person who went on the killing spree against the police. The police used a drone to kill him. So we're not following the rules, and that's really scary. And the U.S. doesn't need to be involved in targeted killing either, or funding any of these things. I'm going to pass it back to you.
Uh, hmm. uh, well, you continued with your argument that we are actually setting a bad example by conducting this kind of surgical strikes. And certainly the other countries won't like this. If I use word like, then they certainly won't like this to for other countries to conduct surgical strikes in their territory, right? This is what you presented. So let me tell you that there are certain modes and certain code of conducts to follow whenever there's a diplomatic relation between two different countries. Obviously, any country wouldn't like any other country to infiltrate in their area without their permission and then conduct any kind of surgical strike, right? I mean, this will just generate a sense of insecurity among the citizens, and this is very common thing. And they will certainly, if I mean, say if you came to know that any other country, say India, right, infiltrated in United States and bombarded somewhere in the country, say the sense of insecurity, imagine the sense of insecurity you would feel. How can you instill confidence about the government that is operating in the United States right now, right? So obviously government, neither it would accept, nor it would agree, nor it would support such kind of strikes to happen in their territory. uh, Moreover, so I think uh, um, this is how it should go. And already a lot of practice actually being done in this particular area. And people are, I think the point that you presented, that more you are actually generating more terrorism by this manner. Then there are actually a lot of practice for to talk to terrorism has already been done, right? We have already tried, I mean, each and every country has already tried to talk to terrorism, to talk to terrorists, to establish a calm environment, and to approach a certain argument, to approach a certain approach, so that you know a proper environment can be established between the two countries. But that actually never worked, and surgical strike actually came out to be an ultimate solution for that matter. So I think I'll wait to pass it on to on you till my time ends, because I'll wait for you to make next segment. Let's see what you make.
Okay. The best I was able to understand what you're saying is, it sounds like to me you're saying that we tried to talk to them and it didn't work. So my question is, when did we try to talk to them? And also, I'd like to point out that a couple of things. One being that we've actually given money to some of these groups to fight in Syria, for example. Uh, we don't know who the moderate rebels are. There's no way of knowing, and there's no way of knowing that the weapons that we're giving to the rebels in Syria aren't going to these groups. And of course in Syria, if these drones are so great, why is the U.S. sending all these troops there? Why can't it be resolved? And why would we do such a thing to Assad in the first place? So it kind of goes going back to um, uh, target how we shouldn't be involved in these foreign interventions and trying to change regime changes and that sort of thing. And of course, it's easy to point out how this is escalated because ISIS is kind of the old Al Qaeda, and so are these rebels. They're these same groups. They change names and they radicalize in different directions, but it's a lot of the same people. Um,
when we did try to talk to terrorists, that's a very legitimate question and very pertinent one. Well, I'm uh, I'm not sure about the other countries, but in India, we tried multiple times already to talk to terrorism and to talk to Pakistan itself and to talk to major terrorist organizations like ISIL, Al Shabaab, Boko Haram, and Al Qaeda. We have, I mean, there are numerous occasions. I cannot certainly name all of them, but you can actually search it on the net. It's available, and none of them worked. Actually, the ultimate conclusion is to uh, conduct a kind of surgical strike or let them know that if you're going to attack or if you're going to cause any kind of imminent harm, then we are just going to strike you back. So I think this kind of terror inspiration can only keep them away. And moreover, I think to defeat such kind of groups while remaining within accepted moral envelopes is, or moral envelopes of ourselves, uh, certainly we have to be innovative, right? Innovation and technology could be a mean because it's improving with the course of time, and this is certainly something over which terrorists don't have their hands at, right? Technology is where they are lacking right now. So we can certainly use this particular topic to fight them back, and we have to be highly focused and determined as well. Moreover, I think one more thing to put in here is all the countries need to work together in order to eradicate the terrorism. Because if we talk about some of the particular organizations, namely ISIS, Boko Haram, and Al Qaeda, and etc., etc., then these are the people which are actually affecting all the countries in the world. So we have to undoubtedly we have to get together and fight this together. Let's see if that could be eradicated this way. And to your second point, I'm sorry, your voice was actually interrupting, so I couldn't get what you were saying. But I think I will stop here. Let's see what you have to say. And I would request you to stay to the point. No. Right now, our topic is U.S. drones attack, or whether they are necessary or not. Certainly, there have been talks to terrorism. There have been several other ways in which uh, uh, we try to propitiate the matter. But right now, the surgical strikes and taking a rough course seems the only possible way.
Okay, so my understanding is that your argument here is that diplomacy didn't work. I'm really sorry that diplomacy isn't working between Pakistan and India. I know a lot of Americans aren't aware of that this situation, and I think they really should be. But you know what? That doesn't mean that I have to go over there and tell somebody what to do and solve it. I don't need to be. I'm not. The U.S. does not need to be the world's policeman. And in fact, we are now, as I pointed out recently, the U.S. is enabling you to do this yourself. And if you want to do that, why I won't stop you from doing that either. But as far as the U.S. and the U.S. drone strikes, we don't need to be involved. And that's what my other. I assume that maybe I know there's some problems. What I was trying to relate is how the U.S. how this idea of targeted killing and the U.S. Doing these interventions has failed, and I was using Syria as an example because we are sending troops over there right now. So but we're not using drones, right? So that's my argument there, is that this isn't helping. And in fact, my understanding is the reason that the numbers in Syria and Iraq, where Al Qaeda and ISIS and all these groups are running rampant, are actually worse than the numbers in Pakistan. The whole that 90% of the deaths are not the target, and only it looks like only 6% of the deaths are actually. Um, that was my point there, and I only have a couple minutes left total, so I'm going to go ahead and pass it back.
Well, I have a said a little for the point that you presented. because you told me that people, why cannot we just simply send troops over there, right? In spite of conducting this kind of surgical strikes. Okay, maybe I misunderstood. I mean, what you said earlier was actually people people who are actually conducting surgical strike, in spite of sending the drones over there, they're actually causing less harm, right? So that was your point on first place. So let me tell you that if we go by the statement from Mr. Obama made earlier in a press conference, so I certainly I cannot corroborate, so I do not know if that was true or not. But if we were to go by the argument, then these strikes are actually more likely to cause less harm than it would be in any other way in which the strikes would have been done, right? So I think this is why such kind of using drones would certainly serve the purpose well. Moreover, as I've already stated, that such kind of strikes are actually, their precision and their accuracy with their attack, with the attack is actually improving with the course of time because of the improving technology. So again, I have repeated this point for 3 times, but I'll repeat it once again to substantiate my point that these using drones to attack for to conduct any kind of surgical strikes, as far as you are sure that you're attacking the target which are actually trying to cause imminent harm, is actually the intended target. In that case, I think this is the best possible solution that we have. Moreover, I think using simply using troops for controlling the terrorism is not a very feasible solution. Certainly, it's not it's not very possible solution which could be done because there are several difficulties, there are several intricacies involved when when there is a method of two countries. Several then diplomatic factors has to be taken into consideration. So I won't get into all these things, but certainly I think I have made 4 points. I would like you to repeat the point that you have made earlier, so that I can understand it once more. I'll wait for you to make the next document.
Okay, I only have about two minutes left, total time left. So the point is that the U.S. should not be involved whatsoever. Not that troops should be over there. That we shouldn't be involved. I think you're confusing troops for diplomacy, because the U.S. is the UN basically, which is a group of countries. As you said, there should be a group of countries. There is one. It's the UN, and the U.S. is the top watchdog, and we're setting a poor example. Um, and it's failed in Syria and Iraq. Um, I'm going to go ahead and get into well. Uh, Also, going back, well, I should just say, okay, so for surgical strikes, and that goes back to your rebuttal. There goes back to my stating that the bias would be an adult male, that any adult male would be counted, and we only really know through cell phones are the best way of. I mean, did they get a call after we dropped the bomb? That's the only way of measuring the success. And also, we know that for each strike, it's possible that there will be 40 to 60 more terrorists as a result. So I do not believe that drone attacks are necessary. I believe the U.S. Should use diplomacy instead of surgical strikes because they're a violation of international law, and the Pakistani government doesn't want us to do that. And the U.S. should set a better example. Um, uh, and because as I've said, the targets can't be accounted. They can't be accounted for because the bias is any adult male. There's no reason for the U.S. to be involved whatsoever, and If we were to be involved, it should be through diplomacy and the UN, like the group of nations that exists. And I'm out of time, so you have 11 minutes.
Okay, I'll make just the final argument because that's the end of the debate. So you told me that US should not be involved. My dear friend, these are the people who are killing you people. Why should it be involved? I told you that your president has the responsibility, and he has a responsibility, and he has to make sure that all of you remain safe. He ought to do what he can to best of his capabilities in order to make sure that every each and every citizen of his country remains safe. And since these people, I don't need to substantiate it. You already know multiple of examples which having done. These people have been attacking. 9/11 was done by them. There were several other attacks, mainly the Oklahoma City bombing and etc. etc. So, in case that these people are actually attacking your civilians, attacking the civilians of your country, and indigenous people. In that case, I think certain substantial steps ought to be taken, and that is why I think these drone attacks are very legitimate means to conduct such kind of strikes. And as far as your point is concerned, that there's no way to know how he is actually the person we are dealing with is actually terrorist, then I think obviously we have the record. We are just not going to confirm this at the point where we are actually going to do the attack. We have been actually analyzing this particular person for long. If we take the example of the person who was actually killed in recent strike, Jihadi John, then he was actually the person who was actually being analyzed for last few months, and that is why they were confirmed that this person is actually the terrorist they were looking for. And he has been involved in multiple death cases, which has actually took place in your country. So I think this is why it's actually a legitimate concern, though I certainly agree to few of your points. Uh, as far as this debate is concerned, I think it was certainly a great experience. It was my second debate, and somewhere between I lost my chain of thoughts, and but certainly it was a great experience. Thanks, man.